Books, welcome back to my channel and welcome to the next in the series called A Closer Book. This is where I review 3 of my recent reads. Today I'm going to tell you about 3 books that I read in the end of January, and I'm finally just getting around to sharing my thoughts with you, so stay tuned for A Closer Book.
I could stay like this, forever following you.
First up is Days of Awe by A.M. Holmes. This is a short story collection that I got from the library, and I was introduced to this title because I downloaded an ARC from NetGalley several months ago while this was still in the galley phase. It was since published as a hardcover in June 2018, so you know how long I've had the ARC on my shelves, in my electronic shelves. And so I requested this from the library because I wanted to get to it, and I'm happy that I read it because I liked a lot about these stories. The first story is entitled Brothers on Sunday, and it's about these 2 adult brothers who, even though they're now adult professionals, they haven't gotten over their sibling rivalry, and they get together. It seems like they get together every Sunday for some kind of social interaction where they have an opportunity to interact, but they're also meeting and mingling with the friends of one of the brothers who the other brother seems to want to co-opt. And it's interesting that we have these men who should be mature, and yet they devolve to their childhood roles. They return to their childhood taunts and regress to their childhood insecurities and childish identities, betraying some of what they must have learned from their parents or some of what they learned in the interactions that they had when their parents were around. And so it's interesting that these 2 men who seem to have success in their present lives look back at their past as the days of awe that they spend their time yearning for in some way. The second story is entitled Whose Story Is It and Why Is It Always on Her Mind? And it's about a young woman who's hospitalized because she pushed thorns into the bottom of her feet and developed an infection. Later we realize that this is a disturbing response to episodes that have involved her mother and her grandmother before that, both of those incidents involving roses. And so now this woman has taken the thorns and injured herself. So this woman has involved herself in a trauma, almost as if she's walking in the footsteps of those women who've come before her. And so here again we have a character who has the potential for success in the present, except that she's tortured about events that have happened in the past that she doesn't have any opportunity to control, but she's not able to deal with things mentally and give herself release from them just because she's tortured by these past events. That was the second story. And in the third story, which is the title story, and no, I'm not going to tell you about all the stories in this collection because there are quite a few of them, but because this is a title story, I wanted to mention it and to show the connection between all of them. The title story, Days of Awe, is about a novelist who's fictionalizing real-life trauma. She's writing about the Holocaust and the genocide that the Jewish people experienced. And her novel has been received with varying responses. There are some who laud her for her ability to bring this terrible story to readers and to portray things that we seem like we want to hear about, even if we want to hear about them from the safety of fiction. And so she's invited to a panel discussion where she, as the fictional novelist, she's sharing her telling of these stories alongside people who lived through the genocide, who lived through the Holocaust. And they are not able to see her as a truth teller because she's not telling the truth, she's telling fiction. And it's interesting their response, it's interesting her response to how they project their disapproval onto her. While there are several characters in this story, each presenting some different angle for the discussion, there's a very interesting face-off between the 2 Jewish women at the center. The young Jewish novelist who's fictionalizing the genocide, and the older Jewish woman who lived through the Holocaust and is not able to experience pleasure in her current life because of everything that she faced, all the trauma that she faced as a child and all the people that she lost, all the losses that she's endured. She's not able, even though she's a survivor, she's not able to thrive. She's only able to survive and talk about what she went through. It sparked a very interesting question for me. The differences with how these two women process pain, how they process the losses that the Jewish people endured, how one is making a living from writing about things that she didn't experience herself, but that she's heard about, and then one who's not able to live because of the things that she's endured. And so in all of these cases, we see characters looking at the past with awe and genuflection, but for all of them, awe means something else. For some it's respect, for some it's deference, for some it's inspiration, for some it's a place to be lost in and not be able to emerge into the present. I really admire the way the author presented this unifying theme across this breadth of characters and scopes of experiences and perspectives. We could still see what she was presenting in this collection, and so I really enjoyed this. I'm glad I had a chance to check it out. I'm grateful to NetGalley for providing me an ARC about a year ago so that I'll be introduced to this collection. This is book 12 in my 2019 reading. If you've been watching these videos closely, you might see that while I am reviewing all the books that I read, the numbers might seem like I'm skipping some things, and that's because I am posting some single book reviews for the Man Booker Prize winning books that I have read, as well as books that I think are deserving of single book reviews. One of those reviews is going to be Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James, because there's a lot of hype and I want to publish a single book review for that one. So the 3-book series, the Closer Book series, are going to be of the books that I'm not doing single book reviews for. And so this is book 12 and this is book 13, The Girl Who Wrote Loneliness by Kyung, Sook, Shin, which I had on my TBR for months, got it from the library, renewed it as many times as I could, and I finally read it. This one is translated by Ha-Yoon Jung or Ha-Yoon Jung. I'm not sure how you pronounce these names, and I'm sorry, I butcher names. I really apologize for that, but just understand, I'm just a reader. I read things, so I know what things look like, but as it relates to pronunciation, I'm not always the best at that. But about this book, The Girl Who Wrote Loneliness is a split timeline, dual perspective narration. At one point, it's a first-person narrator. At another point, it's an omniscient third-person narrator, but both following the single main character at different points in her life. In one view, she's a 16-year-old girl living in Korea and dreaming of becoming a writer. She's living under the, I don't want to say this name because I know I'm not going to pronounce it properly. It's spelled Y-U-S-I-N, under the Yusin regime, dreaming of becoming a novelist. 16 years later, when we meet her again, she's 32. She's now the successful novelist that she always dreamed of becoming. And she's looking back at some of the things that she aspired to and dealing with the repercussions that she couldn't have expected when she first started having the dream. She's 16 years old in the year 1978. The Yusin regime is going on, and she's working in a factory alongside her cousin who's older than her by just a couple of years, and they left their rural home together to go live in Seoul, Korea with older brother. And most of the characters in here don't have their names given, and so older brother's character is always referred to as older brother, cousin is always referred to as cousin, and while that is their name, that's also their identity. And so they're very stereotypical. Older brother is distant. As the firstborn of the family, he's a provider, he's also an authoritative figure, and he sacrifices for these two young women, allowing them to eat when he doesn't have enough because the rations are just not enough. He makes room for them when it seems like there isn't enough physical room in the space where they occupy. And throughout all of that, we see the life that these young people live, but we also are treated to some of the details about work life, because when these two young women go to Seoul to live, older brother gets them a job in a factory, and while they are working, they also have the opportunity to go to school in the evening, and we get to see a little bit of that existence, what it's like working in these factories, what are some of the conditions that they are forced to work under. So we're also getting a little bit of the backstory on some of the issues that these workers faced with the formation of trade unions. And while we know that unionized workers will get protections that non-union employees would not benefit from, we also get to see the hardships of joining the union, the hardship of the union becoming an entity in the first place, but also the backlash from their superiors about these young people who want to join the union and want to get the benefits, but also don't want to lose the advantages that are being dangled in front of them if they don't join up with the union. In the next timeline, the main character is 32. She's a published novelist, and she revisits her childhood. She revisits that time in her life mentally, but also in conversations with other people, because she's now being pulled back into the past with every person who reaches out to her and expresses some annoyance that she hasn't written about them, that she doesn't maintain connection with them. She's also afraid that they will find out that she has written about them, that they will be upset at how she has represented them when she has included them in her writing. It's a little bit of a back and forth between this woman who should be successful and who should be enjoying her success, but constantly being pulled back into relationships that she's done everything to escape. And time is fluid in this representation, and so while we have her at 32, she's regressing to these earlier versions of herself in conversation with her family members, in conversation with her former friends, and they pull her back into that former existence when she's done everything to escape it, even to the extent of writing herself out of it and writing them out of her life as well. This had a lot of successes for me, and I don't really want to dwell on the critiques, but I must point out one. The fluidity of time and the fluidity of the movement from one timeline to the next was not always clear where the partitions were. We get these kind of paragraph entries, and so we expect that from one to the next we're moving from one timeline to the next, but that's not always true. I think I understand her use of this as a writing device where for the main character time is fluid, and so for the reader it also has to be fluid. And it wasn't always a huge confusion. It was just every time it happened, it kind of pulled me out of the story because I had to be consciously thinking, am I in the present or am I in the past? And I think it might have been one of the techniques that the author used, and I'm not going to say that it wasn't successful. It was just, there were points where it felt like it detracted from the story even a little bit. This is a book that has been popular here on BookTube. This is an author that is pretty popular here on BookTube. She has another book, maybe more recently translated, called The Court Dancer, that I still want to read. I've heard other people who've read it and loved it. Matthew Sharapa is one of those people. He's tried to encourage everyone to read that book. And in wanting to expose myself to this author, this is the second of her books that I'm reading. I read her novel I'll Be Right There last year, so this is the second of her books that I'm picking up, and I do want to read more from her. So this is not an I didn't enjoy, so I'm not going to read anything from this author again. This was just, it was fair. I like this book a lot. I didn't love everything about it, so I'm gonna wait and I'm gonna see how I do with her next book before I give a complete assessment of her writing. But for now, I like this, and if you've read it, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. So that was book 14 of my 2019 reading year, and book 15 is this arc that I got from Blink YA Publishers, and this is Between Before and After by Maureen, Doyle, McQuerry. And I liked a lot of things about this book as well. This is also a dual timeline, dual perspective book, except this time we're reading about two main characters, a mother and daughter. But in both timelines, we're following the female character when she's a teenage girl. We first meet the daughter, Molly. She's a teenager in 1955, and she's failing a writing assignment when we meet her because she'd rather get a failing grade than submit something that is below her standards. So she'd rather submit nothing. But we also see Molly shielding her little brother Angus from the rage that her mother displays when she gets this phone call and goes on this rant, decapitating the roses outside, taking out her anger and her frustration on things that have no chance of fighting back. And so this seems like representation of Elaine's character, that she's a little bit of a bully, even if she's only bullying the flowers. Yet despite that first introduction to Elaine as being a negligent, overworked, abandoned single mother, we then flip to the 1919 timeline, where we get to see Elaine as a teenager and her responsibility of taking care of her younger brother now that her mother and baby sister have died and her father is turning to drink instead of providing for his family. So in this timeline, Elaine and her family are living in New York, and we get to witness the flu epidemic that claimed all of these lives. We also see the overnight maturation of these young people as they were forced to take responsibility for themselves, for their siblings, sometimes for their families. We see Elaine having to get a job to contribute to the household expenses, but also taking responsibility for the welfare of her younger brother. And so she's forced to become a mother. She's forced to become a mother figure, even while she's a child herself. And so it kind of makes up for how she is now that she is a mother herself, and also still having to be responsible for all these people. So it's very interesting, this dual perspective, because it kind of makes excuses and makes justifications for the characters. Even while we might be reviled by them, we also feel like we understand them. But aside from the historical presentation, the author also includes a Hansel and Gretel retelling that binds these two timelines and these two storylines together. We have this Hansel and Gretel retelling, which you know is about a pair of siblings who get separated from their biological family and seem like they are adopted, or at least they're being fostered by someone who at first glance seems to want to do right by these children, but is also looking to take advantage of them. And within this book, because we have these two pairs of siblings in different timelines, we're not really sure which pair of siblings will represent the Hansel and Gretel characters. And so there was a little bit of a suspense throughout the story, because, you know, we know that this retelling is happening. We see both pairs of siblings being wooed into these relationships, but it was really good. And there's one more thing. Yeah, there's one more thing. There's also this religious undertone. One of the characters is a religious figure, and there's evidence that he's performed this miracle. So within the Hansel and Gretel retelling, which was a fairy tale and a story that we've heard for a long time but no, we don't believe in, even though we can find parallels in our life that mirror it, we also had this religious miracle that they were trying to verify, as though they were going to treat religion as another fairy tale that we've heard our whole lives, and they're not sure whether we believe historically, but can see parallels of in our real life. So there was a lot about this book that I really appreciated. I like the layers of complexity and interest. However, my one critique of this book, I'm giving just one critique for each one of these books, is that this is marketed to young adults. And while there was a linear enough plot, at least in each timeline there was a linear plot that I feel like a young reader would be able to navigate through and understand, I felt like the themes that were being presented here were maybe a little bit above young readers' interest. I felt like the themes were more geared towards adult readers of young adult fiction. I didn't think that having a teen character go through these things necessarily meant that this would be a YA focused book. I felt like this could be marketed to a more literary adult audience and probably better served. So I liked the book. I liked a lot of things about this book. I'd recommend it. It is an ARC. I don't think it has been released yet. Yes, it has been. It went on sale on February 5th. So if you've read it, or if you're just interested in talking a little bit more about it, I'd love to chat with you about it in the comments. Whether this one, Between Before and After by Maureen, Doyle, McQuerry, or The Girl Who Wrote Loneliness by Kyung, Sook, Shin, or Days of Awe by A.M. Holmes. So these are three of my recent reads, and I'd love to chat with you in the comments about them. So go ahead and leave me a comment down below. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Please subscribe if you want to see more. I post a new video almost every day. Not quite every day, because that's a schedule that I don't think most people could keep up with, but I'm trying to post more frequently. So another video from me is coming soon. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and let's talk in the comments. So until next time, happy reading.